Good day to you, my dear students. Once again, I'm Sean Xavier Alcolita for our next topic for our Rizal class. So, this will be the next topic, which is the world in Rizal's times, or shall I say, the current events in the time of Rizal. Okay, so these are the events that happened before the birth of Jose Rizal. Okay, so last one in the February 19, 1861, the liberal Tsar Alexander II issued a proclamation emancipating 22.5 million serfs to appease the rising discontent of the Russian masses. But on June 19, 1861, during the birth of Jose Rizal, the American Civil War was raging furiously in the United States on the Negro slavery. On April 12, 1861, the Negro slavery in the United States erupted. But on September 2, 1863, President Lincoln issued his famous Emancipation Proclamation. But on June 1861, Benito Juarez, a full-blooded Zapotec Indian, was elected President of Mexico. Okay, next one here is the Emperor Napoleon III of the Second French Empire, with his imperialistic desire to secure a colonial stake in Latin America, invaded and conquered Mexico. So he installed Archduke Maximilian of Austria as a puppet emperor of Mexico on June 12, 1864. Okay, so the result here is that President Juarez cannot obtain military aid from his friend President Abraham Lincoln because there was a raging American Civil War at the time. Next one is the Battle of Querétaro. So the President Juarez, with the help of the US troops, defeated the Maximilian forces and executed Emperor Maximilian, thus fizzled out Napoleon's ambition to colonize Latin America. So during the birth of Jose Rizal, the Italians and the Germans succeeded in unifying their own countries. The Italians, under the leadership of Count Cavour and of Garibaldi and his army of the Red Shirts, drove out the Austrians and French armies from Italy and proclaimed the Kingdom of Italy under King Victor Emmanuel, with Rome as a capital. So from here, the Prussians, led by Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, defeated the France in the Franco-Prussian War and established the German Empire on January 18, 1871, with King Wilhelm of Prussia as the first Kaiser of the German Empire. Okay, so with the defeat of Emperor Napoleon and his Second French Empire was collapsed, and over its ruin, the Third French Republic arose, with Adolphe Thiers as the first president. So the times of Rizal saw the flowering of Western imperialism. So from here, England emerged as the world's leading imperialist power. And from there, during the glorious reign of Queen Victoria, the British people asserted Britannia rules the waves. So from there, Britain won in the First Opium War from 1840 to 1842 against the tottering Chinese Empire under the Manchu dynasty, and acquired the island of Hong Kong. So, in the Second Opium War, which happened in 1856 to 1860, Britain won again and forced the Manchu dynasty to secede, no, in Kowloon Peninsula. So after suppressing the Indian rebellion and dismantling the Mughal Empire, she imposed her Raj, or rule, over the subcontinent of India, so India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. By winning the three Anglo-Burmese War, she conquered Burma. So other lands in Asia that became British colonies, these were Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, Maldives, Aden, Malaysia, Singapore, and Egypt. In South Pacific, they were able to get Australia as well as New Zealand. Other imperialist countries that followed Britain's example, just like France. So France, which is from France, there's Vietnam, annexed Cambodia and Laos, then merged all these countries into federated colony under the name French Indochina. So with the Dutch, they colonized the vast and rich archipelago of the East Indies and named it the Netherlands East Indies, which is now Indonesia. Okay, next, the Tsarist Russia. The Tsarist Russia conquered Siberia, Kamchatka, Kurilis, and Alaska. So, because of this, Russia later on sold Alaska to the United States for an amount of $7.2 million in 1867. That is why Alaska has become one of the 50 states in the United States of America. And moreover, she also conquered the Muslim Khanates of Bukhara, Khiva, and Kokand in Central Asia. Okay. So they also acquired Manchuria, and as a sphere of influence, they were able to build the 5,800-mile Trans-Siberian Railway, so reputed to be the world's longest railroad linking Vladivostok and Moscow. In July 8, 1853, an American squadron under the command of Commodore Matthew Perry reopened Japan to the world, so which is 214-year isolation. So from there, Emperor Meiji Matsuhito modernized Japan by freely accepting Western influences, including imperialism, fought against the weak China in the Sino-Japanese War, grabbed Formosa, which is Taiwan, Pescadores, and later annexed Korea. So at that time, during the time of when the Emperor Meiji modernized Japan, that was the start when the Edo period of Japan began to decline, and the samurais began to decline at that time. No? So from there, Germany was late in the scramble for colonies in Asia and Africa, turned to the islands in a mid-Pacific world. So the Iltis, German warship, entered the harbor of Yap, an island in the Carolines, so seized the island and hoisted the German flag. So strangely, the Spanish governor of the Carolines, Don Enrique Capriles, was present in the island but showed no resistance. So the German seizure of Yap Island enraged Spain, who claimed sovereignty over the Carolines and Palau by the right of discovery by Francisco Lezcano, who named it Carolina in honor of King Charles II. So, to abort the brewing conflict between the two countries, both submitted the Carolina question to Pope Leo XIII for arbitration. So the Pope, or the Holy Father, recognized Spain's sovereignty over the island but gave two concessions to Germany: the right to trade in the disputed islands and the right to establish a coaling station in Yap for German Navy. So Rizal was in Barcelona when these things are happening, and he even wrote an article on the Carolina question at Publicidad, a newspaper owned by Don Miguel Moraita. So while imperialist powers were enjoying the fruits of their colonial rule, Spain, who was once upon a time the mistress of the world, was stagnating as the world power. So because of this, Spain lost her rich colonies in Latin America, namely Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Ecuador. In addition to that, Spain has also lost her colonies in Central American countries like Costa Rica, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, and also Uruguay. So from there, the colonies that remained under the Spanish rule was the last three countries: Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Okay, so the Philippines during Rizal's time. So, during the times of Rizal, the sinister shadows of Spain's decadence darkened the Philippine skies. Okay, so the next slide will be talking about the evils during the Spanish rule in the Philippines. So number one, so the instability of colonial administration. It started during the reign of King Ferdinand VII and marked the political chaos in Spain. The Spanish government underwent frequent changes owing to bitter struggles between the forces of despotism and liberalism and the explosions of Carlist wars. The political instability in Spain adversely affected the Philippine affairs because it brought about frequent periodic shifts in colonial policies and a periodic regaddon of colonial officials. Second one is the corrupt officialdom. With few exceptions, the colonial officials sent by Spain to the Philippines in the 19th century were a far cry from their able and dedicated predecessors of the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. They were highly corrupt, incompetent, cruel, and venal. Just an example, Governor General Rafael de Izquierdo, who executed Gomborza from a bribe money that was worth 50,000 pesos. The next one is Admiral Jose Malcampo, who was a good moral fighter but was an inept and weak administrator. Next one is Governor General Fernando Primo de Rivera enriched himself by accepting bribes from gambling casinos in Manila. Next one is Governor General Valeriano Weyler, was a cruel and corrupt governor-general of Hispanic and German ancestry. And the last one here is Governor-General Camilo de Polavieja, a cruel governor-general who signed Rizal's execution under the command of Archbishop of Manila in the name of Archbishop Bernardo Nozaleda. Another one here is no Philippine representation in the Spanish Cortes. The first Filipino delegate was Ventura de los Reyes, who took the active part in the framing of the Constitution in 1812. So from there, the Philippines experienced the first period of representation in the Spanish Cortes from 1810 to 1813. However, it was abolished in the year 1837. And lastly, in this slide, the human rights denied to Filipinos. Since the adoption of the 1812 Spanish Constitution and other constitutions in the succeeding years, the people of Spain enjoyed freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of association, and other human rights, except freedom of religion. So the Spanish authorities who cherished these human rights or constitutional liberties in Spain was also denied them to the Filipinos in Asia. Okay, so to continue, which is the no equality before the law. So the Spanish missionaries who introduced Christianity into the Philippines as early as 16th century taught that all men, irrespective of color and race, are children of God, and as such as they are brothers and equal before God. However, in practice, the Spanish colonial authorities who were Christians did not implement Christ's precept of the brotherhood of all men under the fatherhood of God. Especially during the last decades of Hispanic rule, they arrogantly regarded the brown-skinned Filipinos as inferior beings, not their Christian brothers to be protected, but rather as their Majesty's subjects to be exploited. So, it is true that the Leyes de Indias, or the Law of the Indies, were promulgated by the Christian monarchs in Spain to protect the rights of the natives in Spain's overseas colonies and to promote their welfare. However, this law was not implemented in the Philippines at the time. So consequently, the Filipinos were abused, brutalized, persecuted, and slandered by their Spanish masters. They could not appeal to the law for justice because the law, being dispensed by the Spaniards, was only good for the white Spaniards. So, the next one is the maladministration of justice. So, the courts of justice in the Philippines during Rizal's time were notoriously corrupt, and also the courts of injustice as far as the brown Filipinos were concerned. So the Spanish judges, like the judges, fiscals, prosecuting attorneys, and lawyers, and other court officials were inept, venal, and oftentimes ignorant of the law. So justice was costly, partial, and slow. Poor Filipinos had no access to these courts because they could not afford the heavy expenses of litigation. The next one is the racial discrimination. So Spain introduced Christianity into the Philippines with its beautiful egalitarian concept of the brotherhood of all men under the God the Father. Spanish authorities, civil as well as ecclesiastical, zealously propagated the Christian faith but seldom practiced its sublime tenets. They regard the converted Filipinos not as brother Christians but as inferior beings who were infinitely undeserving of the rights and privileges that the white Spaniards enjoyed. So that's racial discrimination. Now, the next one is the phraseology, no? So we can understand that in phraseology, it was the Spaniards who were the ones who are taking command or taking the command of the government. So the governor generals are just only obeying what the church, or shall I say what the friars commanded them to do. Just like the example of Governor General Camilo de Polavieja. He signed the execution letter of Rizal under the command of uh, Manila Archbishop Bernardo Nosaleda. So just that's the example of philocracy. The next one is the forced labor. It is also known as the polo, no? It was a compulsory labor imposed by the Spanish colonial authorities on adult Filipino males in the construction of churches, schools, hospitals, building and repair roads and bridges, the building of ships in the shipyards and other public works. So, originally, the Filipino males ranging from 16 to 60 years old were obliged to render polo for 40 days a year, no? So later, the Royal Decree of July 12, 1883, implemented by the new regulations promulgated by the Council of State of February 3, 1885, increased the minimum age of the polistas who performed the forced labor, so from 16 to 18, and reduced the days from labor from 40 to 15. So that's the one forced labor. The next one is the haciendas owned by the friars. During Rizal's times, the Spanish friars belonging to different religious orders were the richest landlords, for they owned the best haciendas, no, in the Philippines. So the rural folks who had been living in these haciendas and cultivating them generation after generation became tenants. Naturally, they resented the loss of their lands which belonged to their ancestors since pre-Spanish times. Legally, however, the friars were recognized as the legal owners of the said lands because they obtained royal titles of ownership from the Spanish crown. And lastly, the Guardia Civil. So, the last hated symbol of Spanish tyranny was the Guardia Civil, or the Constabulary, which was created by the Royal Decree of February 12, 1852, as amended by the Royal Decree of March 24, 1888, for the purpose of maintaining internal peace and order in the Philippines. It was patterned after the famous and well-disciplined Guardia Civil in Spain. While it is true that the Guardia Civil in the Philippines had rendered meritorious services in suppressing the bandits in the provinces, but they later became infamous for their rampant abuses such as maltreating innocent people, looting their carabaos, chickens, and valuable belongings, and raping the helpless women. Both officers, like the Spaniards, and men, like the natives, were ill-trained and undisciplined, unlike the Guardia Civil in Spain, who were respected and well-liked by the populace. Okay, so that's all for this topic, my dear students. Thank you very much.